are back with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you from Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the pop culture cosmos, where we cover the latest news and trends of pop culture each and every week, twice a week, wherever you get your podcast, plus also as well Game Source, and of course, the Lakers Fast Break, where we cover the NBA and the Lakers all year long, right there for you on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Plus also as well the Dom-iNation Sports Nation. Catch Chris and Dom Lardieri covering the sports world like no one else. So please go ahead and catch the Dom-iNation Sports Nation today, wherever you get your podcasts. And again, if you get a chance, please go ahead and subscribe right there for us on YouTube on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel. Also, as well, subscribe on Spotify to go ahead and get the latest notifications on when we go live on the air or when we come at you with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. And since drafts are coming, mainly this weekend, because this is the last weekend before the start of the NFL season, because the NFL season starts next Thursday, everyone. Heads up, we're going to see a lot of drafts taking place in the next few days. So if you have a question on your draft, if you have questions on who you think or who you would like to draft, plus potential starting lineup changes, etc., possible waiver wire moves, everything going down the line, and of course, true and trade season hits, please go ahead and hit us up. No problem at all. IS Fantasy Football at yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter/X, whatever it is today. But I tell you what, it is going to be a great weekend for a lot of fantasy football owners because it is the biggest week of the year for fantasy football because all the drafts or most of the drafts will be taking place. There's always a few that happen after the start of the season or right on the verge of the season. But you know what? Since most people are available on the weekends, it's probably going to start for most people this weekend. I know our draft is coming up tomorrow night, and I'm looking forward to it. But here today to talk about last minute tips and tricks plus news that you need to know about some leading running backs and quarterbacks that are having issues or they're returning to the lineup. Good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check out what he's doing today along with his son, Dominic Lardieri. It is Chris Lardieri at Dom-iNation Sports Nation. Chris, great to have you here, my friend, back once again. I know you'll be off next week. Already got the Lakers Fast Break crew to cover for you. But it is draft time for most people out there, so it's the time to go ahead and strategize, getting serious about who you want to pick in your fantasy football draft.
Absolutely. Great to be back, Gerald, as always. And yeah, we're in the midst of draft season. Got to chaperone a draft of high school boys, namely Dom and his buddies had their league. They did it in person, even though it was an online Yahoo draft, which was cool because I got to order food and talk a lot of smack after each one of the picks. So that's always fun. And looking forward to it. I mean, like you said, draft season will come fast and furious starting the end of this week and all the way up until, like, for instance, I've got one Wednesday. So looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it myself. Again, we've got our big draft next actually tomorrow. It's right.
Tomorrow,
Like I
yeah.
said, yep, 24 hours away. So I'm looking forward to that. But I just what I've been studying and what I've been preparing as far as the strategies I normally choose also gets dictated by how the draft falls and how the draft goes out as far as what players are available when it's time for me to draft. Your thoughts on this, my friend? You have always a set strategy on who you want to target or what positions you want to target first. I've always talked about mine. You've always talked about yours on the show, but every now and then a draft does not fall the way you want. So what happens? Do you go into panic mode or do you just go ahead and just change course and go in a different direction?
You just change course. And if you're like our league with Yahoo, it's fast and furious. That clock ticks down. It's not like the NFL draft where you got 10 minutes or whatever they're up to these days. And I saw it last night, first pick of the draft. Justin Jefferson? No. Christian McCaffrey. So the owner at number 2 is happy to get Jefferson. Jamar Chase goes 3. And then Austin Eckler comes off the board. So at that point in time, you've got top running backs and wide receivers going. So your Dom's in kind of his conundrum at 5. He ends up taking B. John Robinson just because it's a 12-team snake draft. And he figured by the time I come back around, there's not going to be a lot of quality at running back. Highly doubt Josh Jacobs or Nick Chubb will fall. So you just adapt. I mean, there are guys you always want. And then sometimes you get lucky and they fall to you, or maybe you got some sort of dilemma between a guy you kind of like versus a guy who, value wise might be a better pick. Don't panic. I mean, at the end of the day, you can look at all the rankings you want. You can spin your wheels doing that in the middle of a draft, but you just sometimes got to go with your gut, go with your eyes, go with what you watch and what you know. And don't overthink it. That's key too.
Well, the thing I ask you is though, your when your son said about Bijan Robinson, obviously a very young player, you're already counting a lot on him to go ahead and produce and hit big for you. You talked about Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs just came back to the Raiders last week, at the end of last week, after our last week's show. So I ask you, my friend, when I talked about this earlier about him and Jonathan Taylor holding out, in the case of Jonathan Taylor, it looks like he's been put on the pup list, the physically unable to perform list,
Hmm.
where he'll be out, I think, until week 4, if that's the
Yeah.
case. Your thoughts on this, my friend? These are big changes, but it could also lead to them rushing back onto the field a little bit too soon and depending too much what happens by their teams. So I say that again, this could lead to some injuries and maybe some trepidation on people before they go ahead and decide to draft them in their
Yeah.
drafts.
Definitely, and pat ourselves on the back. The consensus was we thought Jacobs would inevitably sign a deal, and we didn't think the Colts would trade Taylor. But I wasn't expecting this. I mean, clearly, Jim Irsay's injected himself into this kind of face-off with Taylor. Chris Ballard's the GM is stuck in the middle, and it's a hot mess. So, with regard to Jacobs, is he in game shape? I'm not sure, but I mean, he's a clear number one. He got his contract, might not be what he want, but he got the 1 year deal. And at this point, you just got to worry. All right, if he's not in shape, I hope he doesn't get hurt. I hope his production doesn't suffer the first few weeks of the season. That said, I like his upside more than I do with Jonathan Taylor because this is just completely out of left field. Is he hurt? Who knows? Maybe bruised ego, as we were theorizing before the show started tonight. But it's hard to draft Taylor. You just don't know what's going to happen. If he does come back, is he disgruntled? Is he just kind of do as the proverbial term is now, quietly quit on the sideline? Is he going to play hard to try and get a trade? I don't know. That's a hot mess. I really like Taylor. Had he not gotten traded and they just proceeded business as usual, and we'll address this at the end of the year with your contract, I think he's worth a flyer. But right now, he's kind of in that danger zone.
He is in that danger zone. So now it becomes very, very, very precarious on where you draft him. There's some leagues that if they didn't set themselves right and you're going to be drafting tomorrow or the next day or the next day, that he'll still be listed at or near the top of the first round. And if for some reason you're not there or on auto draft or something like that, or you've just, there's got to be some people out there in the drafts that just don't know about his situation that are coming into it blind. They'll end up drafting him way before he should be being drafted.
Absolutely. And then that's the danger of not doing your homework, or if you are auto drafting, not reflecting that in your rankings, because the AI or the computer or whatever it is sees Jonathan Taylor up there ranked pretty highly still, and you're stuck with him with no production for 3 4 weeks.
It's very, very concerning. I think if you're out there and you were really riding high on Jonathan Taylor last year and you're looking to go ahead and do the same this year, the abundance of running backs, at least what's on there, my friend, are not there right now. So there's great concern that the list of running backs is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Now we got Josh Jacobs back, but then again, the risk for injury I think is higher than it normally would be for Jacobs. Your thoughts on what's going on with the running back position? We've talked about it already on our previous episodes, but I think there's still much to be concerned about because so much is dependent on the running back position.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's why you see a Robinson going as high as he is. That and the fact that Arthur Smith really, he made he makes running backs out of guys you haven't heard of before. I know he had Derrick Henry in Tennessee, but Algier, for instance, had a nice year last year. I think with Robinson, he's got that pass catching ability, and that's what you're going to have to start looking for in running backs, the Eckler types who can not only run, but get you those, if you're in a half point PPR, get you, for lack of a better term, those cheap receptions and chalk up some yards there, maybe even a receiving touchdown. So the running backs are thin, as you said. So this increases the values of those running backs. Talking in the past few weeks, might be slotted at the back end of the first round. Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb. I would even venture to say you've got to take a flyer on Jacobs if there isn't too much running back depth staring at you available as you pick late in the first round, let's say. So, yeah, I think there is a risk for injury, but at the same time, if you don't and you get a running back who ends up in a platoon or isn't an every down back, then you've got that. You don't have the injury concern. You've got that point deficiency concern on your overall roster week after week.
Once again, it is Chris Lardieri. You got to go ahead and check him out today at the Dom-iNation Sports Nation, along with his awesome son, Dominic Lardieri. Please go ahead and check them out as they cover the sports world like no one else at the Dom-iNation Sports Nation. My friend, not only is the running back situation for a lot of fantasy football owners in peril, especially as you start to strategize. So we'll cover that as far as the last end, as far as what things you want to go ahead and look forward to and stress that once again. I know we've mentioned it already in our huge fantasy football preview a couple weeks ago and last week as well. But when it comes to the quarterback position, some things have been taking place as far as on the back end as far as the quarterback situations. I mean, you have in New England the fact right now that they don't have a backup quarterback, so you're very concerned about if you decide to go ahead and get a Mac Jones, what the future will be like for that as far as who they pick up, who Belichick might have in mind. You also have the situation going on in Arizona, which seems like a disaster zone and already trying to go ahead and line itself up for Caleb Williams in the NFL draft next year. There are a lot of situations that are of great concern. Also, as well, the Rams, the LA Rams, you're talking about, can Matthew Stafford find the magic once again? But at 35, is he just too beyond what his years will dictate? I know I was the question last night when it was on Three Chicks in a Pod about Aaron Rodgers, which Aaron Rodgers are going to get. And I still brought out, like I did earlier, about how this could be similar to the Joe Montana in Kansas City, or you name the Hall of Fame quarterback at the end of his era, at the end of his career on another team. Your thoughts on this, my friend? I think there's not as many quarterbacks that are 100% locks as there would be on the surface going into this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, I know Belichick was up to his usual tricks again today, and they claimed Bailey Zappi back. I think they signed him to the practice squad. So I guess at some point it'll be Mac Jones backup, but legitimate concern there with Jones. You've really got to be worried, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. Tua's got all the weapons. He's got all the ability in the world. He's just one hit away from either being done or out for a substantial period of time. So I know he wore the special helmet during training camp, but that's a legitimate concern. Joe Burrow came back to practice today, claims he's healthy. Will that leg injury be nagging him all season? That's something else to be concerned about. So, kind of made sense when I looked at the draft results from the league last night and Mahomes went number 7, and I initially thought like, wow, that's really early, and I thought maybe I figured it'd be either he or Hurts would be the first to go. But on the flip side, in a 12-team league, you don't get yourself an elite quarterback, especially in with so many question marks and injuries. You may be stuck on the outside looking in, like one of my teams was last year, having Russell Wilson, and looking for waiver wire help within 2 weeks.
So you tell me, my friend, when it comes to what we're seeing with fantasy football as far as the drafts are concerned, the quarterback situation, again, a little bit, it's still not as solidified as you'd want it to be. But tell me, my friend, are there anything that stands out as far as the quarterback that you see upcoming that you got to point out in your NFL draft?
So, depending on where you draft, and that dictates a lot when it comes to fantasy football, especially in the first 2 rounds with so much talent and so many theories out there about how you should draft. I don't specifically advocate taking a quarterback in the first round, but let's say you're in a 14 team league and you're sitting at 12 or 13, and you might be afraid of someone coming back around on the turn in round 2 and snagging your QB. Maybe there you've got to reach if you want one of the elite 3 or 4 quarterbacks. That said, in last night's draft, there was still some talent hanging around in the 4th and 5th round. So you can wait that long, but don't wait too long because I've seen it happen so many times playing fantasy over the years. The second a Justin Herbert goes or someone like that, everyone else starts following and the quarterbacks come off the board quickly. And like we talked about last week, Daniel Jones in some circles is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. He goes, you might reach a point of no return where you're stuck on the outside looking in, and you're like, all right, do I want Kirk Cousins, for instance, or do I really think Rodgers will put up the production he did 2-3 years ago? So you don't want to be in that predicament. You want to wait, but not too long.
Once again, it is Chris Lardieri from the Dom-iNation Sports Nation. Go ahead and check him out today, wherever you get your podcasts. I know Joe Soro, one of my fellow hosts of the Lakers Fast Break, he just sent word. You want me to come on? So I sent him an invite. So we'll see if he steps on for the last few minutes of our show to talk about what he is strategizing for his upcoming fantasy football draft. But there's a lot of under the radar players we have yet to mention on this show. I know of one right now, but I want to save it for him because he is a fan of that team, a big supporter of that team. So I'll let him go ahead and elaborate more on that. But I want to ask you, is there anybody that you're seeing or eyeing as a potential sleeper for your upcoming draft, which for most people is going to be very, very soon?
Yeah, I mean, every year I say Amon-Ra St. Brown as a sleeper. I think we've reached that point where we're past that, but judging by where I see him getting picked lately, people still don't think of him as elite. So in terms of relative value, I'd say he's a sleeper at wide receiver.
How can he be a sleeper? My God, how many more 1,000-yard seasons can this man have?
Well, everyone's still in love with the Cooper Cups of the world, right? So I don't see St. Brown going in the first round of a lot of these drafts. So I'll
Okay.
take I'll take a mulligan on that. I mean, I think in terms of sleeper at the running back position, oh heck, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to like, there's no depth. So really, you've got to take a flyer on someone. So I mean, I like Kenneth Walker with the Seahawks. I don't think he's a sleeper anymore, but Pete Carroll loves his revolving door running back system there. And you want to talk about a deep sleeper coming out of UCLA, Zach Charbonneau
Well,
has been
that's what
pushing
I'm
for
asking
reps.
you.
Yeah,
That's what I
I
was
mean,
going to ask you because if you were asking about Kenneth Walker, he wouldn't he cut into his playing time if both are healthy?
absolutely. So I mean, and I like Walker. I'd love to draft him, but that worries me. So in that case, I think Charbonneau's a sleeper. I know it's a little bit of a deeper one and a reach, but he could be what Walker was a year ago. You hang on to him about week 6, week 8, he starts to play, and you've got some production when you need him in the stretch run.
Once again, it is Chris Sardieri from Dom-iNation Sports Nation, along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for watching and listening. It is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. And popping in, good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check him out on the numerous appearances that he makes on the Lakers Fast Break, and also a beloved Pittsburgh Steelers fan. It is Joe Soro, Simblades with a Y.com and LakersBall.com. Joe, great to have you here. Your second appearance. You made an appearance last year on Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Uh, Joe meet Chris. Chris meet Joe. Joe is going to be here along with Sean Grice, the madman from Toronto, here on next week's show. Excuse me. So I ask you, my friend, I was thinking as far as with the strategy that you need to lay out, what strategy do you suggest for people and individuals that are coming up here? Because the drafts, as you know, for most people are coming up here in the next few days.
By the way, nice meeting you, Chris. It seems like there's a New York Giant wave that seems to come towards the Laker fast break.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're gonna be talking a lot about the Giants this year.
Nice to meet you as well. And
Nice,
I'm in my son's room. He's got his Giants poster up, so I
yeah,
figure may as well round it.
it's a the Giants and the Steelers have a very similar history. A lot of family connection.
Oh yeah.
For those who know the Rooney Mara, Katie Mara. For those who don't know who are listening, uh, the two empires of football have joined.
Yep. By marriage,
uh,
look it up.
yes, by marriage. I believe the Giants have been around since 1925. The Steelers have been around since 1933. So these guys are the staples of the NFL, or I should say, the pillars of the NFL. And it's not a surprise that they've I guess had the same breeding ground. But anyways, talking about fantasy football, I was for the first time in a long time. The day it finished, the last championship game last year, I was already ready for fantasy football. So this has been like 7-8 months here of anticipation. I had my first draft Monday, and it was a family. It was a family. I'm going to be in 3. 2 of them are my staples, and then the third one, every now and then, my family will want to do one, and they did it. I was dying the first like few picks. My cousin Sal picked Patrick Mahomes first round, and then he picked Jonathan
Taylor
with his second pick.
Oh,
And I go, and Sal, my cousin Sal's he's a different guy. I can't explain. You'd have to be around him. And usually I don't ever like bust his chops or anything like that. It's not. He don't have the personality for it. And not that he'd be sensitive to it. It's not how he works. So I go, dude, you just drafted a quarterback in the first round, and you drafted a running back that we don't even know is going to play. So, anyways, I decided to go running back heavy. I picked 12th out of the 12 players. So that means I was picking last in the first round and then picking first in the second round. So I just said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to get Pollard and Jacobs. And I just said, I'm going to solidify my starting running backs, and I'm going to rock and roll with the receivers as they come, right? So I wanted to make sure I got George Pickens, which I ended up getting because I think he's going to have a huge year. I fell into Samuel. Samuel just dropped, and I felt like he had a down year last year, had a career year the year before. I feel like he's going to have another one this year. And then after that, it was just basically kind of playing the percentages of who's likely going to play better with this particular quarterback and that. You guys were talking about as I was listening before I came on. I'm not feeling good about the Rams. I'm not feeling good about Stafford. When your wife is out saying, hey, they're not clicking over here, then something's really bad over there.
Plus, he's also 35. He's now at an age after injuries coming back, right, Chris, where you got to start questioning exactly his desire. He's already won the Super Bowl. You got to start questioning his desire. It was also mentioned that, he just feels like he's out of touch because he's the old man on a very young roster now. It's not the Super Bowl roster it was 2 years ago. These kind of things may be bundled up to where he might actually be traded sometime during the season.
I'm going to say that the fact that he's played till 35 is somewhat of a surprise for me. The amount of abuse that guy has taken. I mean, I don't know how he's lasted as long as he had. This guy's been playing 14 years in the league, and I mean, I don't think he should play beyond this year. I think he should go at it one more year and just retire. You got everything you need. Unfortunately, he's not going to be a Hall of Famer, at least not in my book. But then again, you never know with the NFL. I think the NFL's made a nice little niche now where they're putting pretty much anybody in the Hall of Fame. Kind of turned into the Naismith Hall of Fame in basketball. But I think he should play out the year and call it a career. Go. He's very eloquently spoken. He can probably have a good broadcasting career. He's, ride off into the sunset with your limbs intact as much as they can be. And that's kind of how I look at that. And this whole thing is what usually happens towards the end. The Brett Favres, the guys that have put in a lot of time, and then you can see them deteriorate to the point where it's obvious there's not enough chemistry on the team. There's this the year before it, you could see kind of a little bit of kind of running out of gas maybe halfway through the season versus the last part of the season. How that factors into the fantasy football part is obviously going to be, is he going to stay healthy for 17 games? I don't believe so. So you're going to have to make a decision on is the backup quarterback in LA going to be feeding your receivers if you're drafting anybody there, or if you've got Cam Akers, doing his thing. You never know.
Chris, I want to ask you this: tight ends, something we've talked about a little bit here in the preview and also last week as well. That seems to be a position where it is dominated by one individual. Then afterwards, it's all a matter of opinion. So I want to hear your thoughts, just like the running backs, and so to some extent, the middle and bottom half of the quarterbacks. It's anyone's game on exactly where anyone lands in your draft and where you see it. Your thoughts on about tight ends and where you think you should prioritize them in your upcoming draft.
Yeah, we're seeing Kelsey go in the first round. So if someone really wants him, he's going to go then. He's essentially a wide receiver, just has
Mhm.
TE next to his name. At that point in time, I wouldn't panic and start making a run on tight ends. There's a definite drop off, but saw in the league last night, Mark Andrews dropped further than I thought he would. We've talked a lot about Darren Waller, and not just because he's a Giant. I think he's in the right system. He's motivated. They say he's healthy coming out of camp in New Jersey, so we'll see about that. But at that point in time, like you said, it's anyone's guess. Everyone's got an opinion on a tight end, but what I think is, and I got burned by him last year. The tight ends like Kyle Pitts someone will overpay and take him too early. Um, I think he's a good tight end. He's not elite. I don't trust Desmond Ridder at quarterback. I think they're going to be a run heavy offense. So I personally would stay away from him, but by all means, tell your fellow players good things about Kyle Pitts, and maybe he'll get taken and Andrews will fall to you.
Last thing I want to cover before we head on out, and your final strategies, guys, for the people this weekend out there as far as your fantasy drafts is, Joe, you might, for your biggest sleepers in the fantasy football draft, in quarterback Kenny Pickett. So tell me a little bit about him and what the hopes for your team, a team that is picked by a lot of people to go a long way in the playoffs. Your thoughts on if that's the case, they're going to have a great season from Kenny Pickett in order to get there.
Yes, it's probably one of the picks that in my first draft that I really, really regret not taking a round before. I ended up getting Dak Prescott, I think, in the 11th round. I should have gone after Pickett at 10 because I really think he's going to have a good year. The only thing with Kenny, and it's going to come down to whatever he was doing in the preseason, he needs to do, which is he's releasing the ball much quicker than he was before, and his release point is quicker than it was last year. So in the NFL, you guys all know better than anybody that the half millisecond is everything in this business. And obviously in the fantasy football world, a catch going 80 yards, a catch being a touchdown is that little piece, that little millimeter. In watching Kenny Pickett in all three preseason games, he was dropping dimes like Aaron Rodgers in 2010 when he won the Super Bowl. Like he was fitting it in spots that, to me, when it comes to a quarterback, there's you can have a career when you're accurate. You don't have to have a strong arm. You don't have to be big. If you're accurate, Drew Brees is a perfect example there. If you're accurate, you're going to have a long career, especially under pressure. And of course, if you want to have a career as a receiver, separation. You don't need to be the fastest, tallest, quickest, but separation. Can you get separation? So what I've seen with the Steelers is the receivers are getting separation, even if it's a yard, which is a lot in the NFL still. Kenny's getting that ball in stride. I mean, he looks like a West Coast quarterback and how accurate he's been. If that continues and he plays all 17 games, he will have a Pro Bowl season, guaranteed. He's got it. What I did in the draft, I should have drafted him. I wanted him. I was thinking about getting him, and then one of my family members ended up getting him when I didn't think they would. I think Howell out of Washington is going to be the big sleeper as far as quarterback. I would watch out for him. I did get him also. I doubled up on my quarterbacks, and I doubled up on my tight ends because this is the first year I can remember stacked tight ends. Every year before, it's always like, man, I got to get lucky and get the right tight end. Otherwise, I have to switch these guys every week. I got Goddard, which has been my guy for a few years now. He's very dependable. And then, of course, I got Mark Andrews when he was available. I wasn't expecting him to be available when he was, but I was like, you know what? There has been some negativity going on there, but I got him anyways. And I said, you know what? If he doesn't work out, I got someone to back him up.
There you go. Sound advice indeed. Once again, it's Joe Soro from SimBladesWithAY.com. If you're in the Southern California area and you need another way to go ahead and experience a better lawn for your front lawn, go ahead and check it out today at SimBladesWithAY.com. And of course, Chris and Dom Lardieri for the Dom-iNation Sports Nation. I'm going to have these guys, in honor of you not being here next week, take care of the woof, 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 the doghouse for the underdog next week. But while they're going ahead and contemplating an underdog for next week, your thoughts, though, my friend, on what you're up to with Dom at the Dom-iNation Sports Nation.
Yeah, I mean, we're just gearing up for the NFL season. Really looking forward to it. Used to be back in the day, the season started at Labor Day, so we kind of got like that extra one extra Sunday to relax and do the fantasy drafts and prep for football here for the next 6 months. So that's first and foremost on our mind. We're enjoying watching Winning Time. I know, Gerald, you have your issues with the show, but from a pure entertainment perspective, I think the writing and acting, primarily from a bunch of virtual unknowns, for instance, guys who play Magic Johnson and Larry Bird are phenomenal. I enjoy it. Just going to throw it out there. I hope HBO picks it up for season 3. Adrian Brody as Pat Riley. Dom said to me, he's like, he kind of looks like Pat Riley, doesn't he? I'm like, yeah, he really does. And just, I mean, he does a phenomenal job. I mean, I really like that show. Like
John
I said,
C. Reilly's been doing a great job as Dr. Jerry Buss.
Unbelievable. I mean, why anyone thought Will Ferrell should get that gig, and I love Will Ferrell. I mean, right, like just living in LA over 25 years now, remembering Dr. Buss and the way he looked and carried himself. I went back and looked at the YouTube video of when the Lakers won their the first title with him as owner in 1980, and like Riley, like he doppelganged him. It was perfect. Just his mannerisms, the way he said it, unbelievable. So we're really enjoying that show, and I know Dom's also probably got one eye looking forward to the upcoming NBA season here shortly.
The original cast, by the way, I found out recently was Michael Shannon.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Michael Shannon's a great actor, but I think John C. Reilly is. And if you needed confirmation, all you got to do is listen to Jeannie's last interview. I can't remember what show it was on. She had said that she had found out the person who's doing the wardrobe for the show for Dr. Buss and John C. Reilly is the same tailor that, or at least the son or something, that took care of her father back in the 80s. So everything that you're seeing that Jerry's wearing brought back a flood of memories for her, because she's like, I'm seeing my dad again. I got goosebumps when she said that, because I was like, man, she's starting to come around, because initially she was negative towards it, but she needed more people like us. Like, I wish I could see Jerry West and tell him how much we love you more with the show, even though it's completely embellished. I go, some of that is there. You can't sit there and tell me that an 80-year-old Jerry West sitting on a podium 2 months ago saying, I'm not a dog, I'm a wolf. Wolf eats dogs. You sitting there telling me that that's not some of you there? Come on, you're in your 80s and you're dropping dimes, or still. That was probably the best quote I've heard ever from Jerry West, let alone, it being just a good quote. I mean, it's the best one, at least I heard from my perspective. So the show, I know Jeff Pearlman's worried about.
Producer and author of the book that inspired this show. We've interviewed him twice on the Lakers Fast Break, and maybe I've tried to reach out, but I know he's asked to be on so many other shows as well. So hopefully he can get around to being on our show once again too, because he's very worried about the future.
I think somebody else should pick up the show if HBO can't handle it. Warner Brothers right now has been going through a lot of. It's not just Warner Brothers, but Warner Brothers is like one of the first ones that have been really struggling with all their just terrible decision making. And if they can't support this show, then somebody has to come out of the woodwork and support it. And it's too good. The fact that the casting on this is unreal, like unbelievable. Brody, he's an Oscar-winning actor. That's an easy one, right? John C. Reilly, that's an easy one. How about these guys, like the guy that's playing Bird, the guy that's playing Magic, and Kareem and Coop? I'm like, damn, man, these guys have these guys. Who prepped these guys? Who's the acting coach doing this? And you got to reward that, man. That doesn't happen. Like, you don't find 6'8". I know that the guy that's playing Kareem isn't going to be 7'1". That's not normal. He's 6'8" or something. I'm like, even though you found somebody 6'8", got the hair perfect, the face, the mannerism. I mean, they really they did a phenomenal job putting this thing together, and I really, really want to see this play out. And I don't know what else to do other than watch it, right? We're watching it. I guess we need more people to watch.
Amen. Get the word out.
That's like I said, I watched the show. We watched the recent episode. We still have yet to talk about it on the Lakers Fast Break, but we will be talking about it here upcoming, and hopefully everybody will give it a chance so that it can go to a season 3. Because as Jeff Pearlman said, we do not want it to end as Lakers fans in 1984. But before we head on out, Z Money 15 was saying he wanted us to actually go over some of the squads that he's got. He's got 2 squads in mind. So, guys, if you're looking in the chat, first squad is T-Law, Etienne, Stevenson, JJ, Lamb, Andrews, and Pickens versus Lamar, CMC, D Swift, Wilson, DK, Hawkinson, and Hopkins as a flex. So you're seeing that on the screen. Your thoughts on which one you might lean in over the other?
That's a tough one.
They're very close.
Yeah,
I'm going to just say that off.
You could punch it into one of those online roster comparers or trade analyzers, and it'd probably be pretty darn close.
Yeah. Of course, then again, Yahoo wasn't exactly the greatest in the world for you and I last year. They graded me higher, and then I ended up making a whole bunch of changes, and then they graded you lower, and then you were leading the division for most of the year.
Exactly. Yeah, like a C in Yahoo is like an A in real life. But hey, one thing that stuck out to me with your team there, your one roster, Travis Etienne. I think that's another guy. Don't want to say he's underrated, but I think he's kind of flying under the radar, and I think both he and Trevor Lawrence will only improve in Jacksonville this year.
I'll tell you what, though, your thoughts, Joe, on as you look at both of these squads?
So that particular set, right? I usually don't like a quarterback and running back starting unless the quarterback has a tendency to do screens or flats with that running back. So let's say Dallas or let's say Jacksonville, they're at the 5-yard line, and obviously the end zone's gonna be difficult to get something through a seam or whatever. Well, if you're able to draw the defense a certain way and you can dump it to the corner to your running back, he runs in, scores a touchdown. You now have a total of 12 points plus yardage on that play. So in terms of the 2 teams that come to my mind, Dallas and Jacksonville will have that they'll have that spot. The other one is Kansas City, but Kansas City is Pachenko might be the guy there, but they kind of run a Belichick type running back committee by committee thing. So I did pick up excuse me one second here. My brain is like in 100 different places. I keep forgetting all the stuff here.
I kind of like the first.
I picked up McKinnon. I picked up McKinnon because he was he absolutely like made me go almost to the last win. I was 3rd in the league, but I should have been number 1. I made a goof at the end that I just absolutely wanted to punch myself in the face. I didn't pick up a kicker that was indoors, which was Joseph for Minnesota. It ended up not. Like, that's the kind of stuff I'm usually good at knowing to make that change, and I didn't. and it ended up costing me a championship. But so again, when you're picking a running back and a quarterback on the same team, you want to make sure that they rely on that running back on screens a lot and as like the fourth option towards the red zone. That's how I look at it, and I think Trevor Lawrence and Etienne are gonna be that.
Chris, any last thoughts? Again, I'm leaning towards his first squad, but just by a hair. It's just they both have their pluses and minuses. I think that for me, again, I think his first squad's just a tiny bit better than the second, but not
Yeah, that
by
was my
much.
initial gut reaction too. I mean, let's face
In
it.
a 10-man PPR, by the way.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and part of that's I'm very bullish on the Jaguars this year, and they play in the brutal AFC South. So I think big picture, you're going to get good things out of Jacksonville.
There you go. Absolutely. But if you have any questions on your draft, upcoming trades, waiver wire pickups, starting lineup changes, or suggestions, please feel free to hit us up. isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. That's isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. But guys, great to have you here. Chris, I know you said you'll be off next week. Joe, you and the madman from Toronto, Sean Grice, coming over for the Lakers fast break, coming over here to talk about some fantasy football. On behalf of everyone at Inside Sports Fantasy Football, I want to wish you very much success in your fantasy football draft and your season upcoming. Z Money, no worries about that. Oh, he's asking, how do we feel about D Swift before we head on out?
I'm 50%. I mean, I have zero. I have no and yes. I just no clue. That's the one guy I have no idea yet at all. Like I can't work either way.
Well, I
Chris?
think he's in a good system in Philly, a better situation for him than Detroit. I've been burned by him so many times, him being named the starter year after year.
Yep.
I keep hearing over and over every year, Gainwell's a sleeper. He'll push the starter. Um, so I'd have to agree, although maybe even leaning being a little down on Swift. I think he'll
Do you,
start the season as a starter, but I don't expect the production that his all his hype seems to dictate.
do you see Rashad Penny taking over?
That's the sleeper there, especially at the goal line.
Okay.
Yeah, and I like Penny. He when he did play with Seattle last year, he was excellent. Had him on one of my teams. But again, it's when he plays. He's injury prone.
Injury prone, yeah.
If he could stay healthy, I completely agree with Joe. I think he pushes Swift out of the starting lineup.
So there you have it, everyone. Last minute tips and tricks, names that you might want to look out for, sleepers that you might want to go ahead and choose. But again, you can always hit us up, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. So for Chris Lardieri at the Dom-iNation Sports Nation and Joe Soro, aka Ox1947 from Simblades, SimbladesWithAY.com, also as well, the Lakers Fast Break. It's Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next week with our first opening week in the NFL with Joe Soro and Sean Grice. They're going to be here talking some fantasy football. Chris will be looking and as far as thinking about more great drafts he needs to be a part of, but he will need to do it in seclusion. So we are allowing
Yes.
him that grace. Yes. So
Yes, my
absolutely.
darkness retreat starts next week. I'm trying not to publicize it, but you've let the cat out of the bag.
How many leagues are you in, Chris?
I am in 2. I would have been in 3, but unfortunately, I wouldn't have been able to make that draft. I try and keep it I try and do 2, 3 max, but my
That's
son's got his own league. I'm just kind of more of like I consult with him on that,
Sure.
help him out a little. So 2.5, we'll say.
That's
Okay.
good. That's good. That's
Fair
a good
enough.
amount. You don't
How
want to
about
go more
you?
than 3
Yeah,
or 2.
yeah, it's hard.
I think I'm only doing 2. I go crazy on basketball drafts, but in football, I think for me, it's just 2 or 3 at the most. And if you're just starting out, if this is your first time around doing fantasy football, 1, just do 1, start off with baby steps, and then you go forward from there. So best advice we could give for you right now, enjoy your fantasy football draft. Don't be deterred if your fantasy football draft does not go the way you want it to go. You can always make changes during the season. There's trades, so many more things, and so many more ways you can go ahead and improve your team. And as long as you stay listening to us right here at ISFF, you'll be getting that advice for you to help you do just that. So for Chris Lardieri and Joe Soros, Gerald Glassford, thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next week. Opening week, kickoff time in the NFL is coming next week right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.